She had been awake for 31 hours when the man who secretly controlled the port she was fighting appeared out of the fog like a warning she almost missed. Customs officers had ignored her calls. Her shipment, tens of thousands of dollars in luxury inventory, was locked behind steel gates with no explanation. And now here she was, standing under industrial harbor lights in a cream-tailored coat, natural curls refusing to stay pinned back, expensive watch catching the cold light like something out of place in a world built for rougher hands. She asked one question that silenced every man on that dock, aside from the paperwork excuse. What's the real issue? Nobody answered. But from the upper floor behind smoked glass, one man heard it. And something inside him that had been dormant for a very long time woke up. Welcome back to Sonnet Love Stories, my beautiful and amazing family. I'm so happy to have you here once again. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss any of our interesting stories. And please take a quick second to like this video, comment, and share it with someone who loves obsessive emotional stories. It really helps the channel grow and boosts our community. Now get comfortable, because today's story is intense. Let's dive right in. The port of Incheon did not care about anyone's schedule. It breathed in the slow, mechanical rhythm of cranes and cargo ships, fog rolling in from the yellow sea every evening like a curtain dropping over a stage that never stopped performing. Georgia Brooks had read about this port in logistics reports, spoken about it on supplier calls, routed shipments through it for 8 months without ever setting foot near its steel bones. She had not planned to come here now. But when her most important container, carrying 1,500 units of the self-heating cosmetic organizer that had already sold out 3 times globally, disappeared into customs review with no timeline, no assigned officer, and no coherent explanation, Georgia bought a ticket, packed a single bag, and flew 14 hours from Los Angeles because she trusted her instincts more than she trusted distance. She had arrived exhausted, irritated, and immovable. The customs supervisor, a heavy-set man with a lanyard and a frown he had clearly rehearsed, tried the usual combinations. Paperwork irregularities. Code review. Regulatory hold. Each excuse she dismantled quietly, pulling documents from her leather portfolio and placing them on his desk with the calm precision of a woman who had taught herself import law at 2 in the morning years ago because she could not afford to pay someone else to understand it. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She simply kept asking the question underneath the question until the supervisor began fidgeting with his pen, and that was when she knew the problem was not paperwork. It was pressure from somewhere above him. She stepped outside into the cold harbor air, leaned against a railing above the dock, and stared out at the rows of stacked containers like a woman calculating her next move on a board only she could fully see. She did not notice the figure watching from the floor above. Seung-jun had been at the port for a different reason entirely, a private logistics consultation that had nothing to do with customs flags or cosmetic organizers. He was supposed to be gone by noon. He had stayed because of a call that turned into 2, and then because he found himself watching the woman below through the smoked glass window of the operations floor with the particular attention he usually reserved for people who were about to surprise him. He had seen people fight systems before. Most of them fought loudly, emotionally, with demands and lawyers and threats. She had done something different. She had asked a question that exposed the system's lie without accusing anyone directly. That required intelligence, emotional discipline, and an instinct for human behavior that most people spent decades trying to develop. He had observed it in her within 10 minutes of watching. He did not go down immediately. Instead, he made a single phone call. Quiet voice. 3 sentences. The name of a government contact who owed him a favor, and a container identification number Georgia Brooks had written on the documents she kept pulling from that portfolio. Then he went back to work as though nothing had happened. That evening, Georgia sat outside a small cafe near the shipping district with her laptop, her portfolio, and a cup of coffee going cold beside her elbow. The harbor lights reflected across the wet stone ground. She had called her operations manager in LA, her Korean logistics contact, and her attorney, and none of them had given her an answer that felt like enough. She was reviewing a document for the fourth time when a voice interrupted her from the side, not loudly, not intrusively, but with the particular calmness of someone who already knew she would listen. "You're fighting the wrong person." She looked up. The man standing a few feet away was Korean, tall, with the kind of build that suggested physical discipline rather than effort, broad shoulders under a long dark coat, sharp jawline. Dark eyes watching her with a steadiness that immediately unsettled her because it didn't feel like curiosity. It felt like recognition, as though he had arrived already knowing things about her that she hadn't said aloud. She held his gaze. "And who are you?" "Someone who knows which person flagged your shipment." He nodded toward the empty chair across from her. "May I?" She should have said no. She was exhausted. She was in a foreign city, and she had no information on this man beyond the controlled confidence in his voice and the fact that he was not trying to impress her. That last part was what made her gesture toward the chair. His name, he told her, was Seung-jun. He offered nothing else. No title, no company, no business card. He sat across from her like a man who had never needed credentials to be taken seriously, and when he told her in careful, specific detail which mid-level government official had flagged her container and why, she recognized the accuracy of it immediately because it aligned with every inconsistency she had already noticed in the paperwork. "How do you know that?" she asked. "I know this port." A pause. "I know most of what moves through it and why things stop." She studied him. There was something behind that answer, something larger that he wasn't offering yet, and she was smart enough to recognize the outline of a man who chose information the way most people chose weapons. Carefully. Strategically. Only what served the moment. "You didn't come here to give me information," she said slowly. "So, what do you actually want?" Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. More like appreciation. "I wanted to know if you were as sharp in conversation as you were with that customs supervisor this afternoon." The fact that he had seen her with the customs supervisor meant he had been watching her before he approached. That should have alarmed her more than it did. "And," she said. "Sharper," he said simply. And then he pointed at her coffee. "That's cold. Order another one. We have time." They talked for 3 hours. Georgia could not explain it later, not to herself, not to the friend she called the following morning, not to any version of herself that made reasonable decisions. 3 hours simply disappeared. They talked about international supply chains and the psychology behind viral consumer trends. He asked her how she had predicted the cosmetic organizer's success before it went viral, and she explained the behavioral pattern she had identified in late-night skincare communities. A specific intersection of comfort-seeking behavior and aspirational purchasing that she had tracked for months before sourcing the product. He listened the way very few people listened, not waiting for his turn to speak, but actually adjusting his thinking in real time based on what she said. She did the same for him. He talked about international freight in a way that revealed far more knowledge than any logistics consultant would have, and she filed that observation away without commenting on it. He was careful, precise. He revealed what he chose and nothing more. And yet somehow by midnight they had wandered into a conversation about desire, consumer desire. Initially, the psychology of luxury branding, what made people want things they didn't need. And the conversation had begun to mean something else entirely without either of them acknowledging it directly. He noticed when she became passionate. The way her hands moved slightly when she was excited about an idea. The way she tilted her chin when she was certain of something. He noticed, and he didn't look away, and at some point Georgia realized she had stopped looking away from him too, and that was when she closed her laptop and said she needed to sleep. He stood when she stood, walked her to the edge of the harbor district without being asked, and stopped at the point where the street split. "Your container," he said. "It should move by morning." She looked at him. "You already made a call." He didn't confirm or deny it. He held her gaze for a beat longer than necessary, and then said goodnight the way a man says goodnight when he intends to see you again. The container was released at 9 a.m. No fees. No resistance. No further explanation from the customs office. Georgia stood in the logistics office staring at the release confirmation on her phone for a long moment. Then she texted her operations manager, forwarded the documentation, and went to find Seung-jun. It took her 40 minutes and a call to the harbor cafe where they had talked, because she had not taken his number and he had not offered it, which, she now understood, was entirely intentional. He appeared instead, arriving at the cafe 10 minutes after she sat down as though he had simply known she would come back. "You had my shipment released," she said without preamble. "You looked like someone who deserves solutions." "That is not an answer." "No," he agreed, sitting across from her with the same unhurried ease. "It isn't." She stared at him. He stared back. And somewhere in the controlled frustration of that exchange, something between them shifted, a current running underneath the conversation that had nothing to do with cargo containers or government contacts. And Georgia felt it in her chest the way you feel weather changing before the sky shows it. "Who are you, really?" she asked quietly. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Someone with more access to this world than you currently know." A pause. "And someone who found you interesting enough to use it." She should have been unsettled by that. She was. But beneath the caution was something warmer and far more inconvenient, and Seung-jun was watching her face with enough precision that she suspected he could already see it. She had planned to fly home the following day. She did not. There was legitimate reason to stay: final release paperwork, logistics coordination, a supplier meeting she had been trying to schedule for 2 weeks that her Korean contact suddenly moved up. She told herself these were the reasons. She did not examine the other reason, which had a sharp jawline and a voice that had been arriving in her thoughts at inconvenient moments since midnight. He reappeared that evening near a bookstore in a quiet district of Seoul she had wandered into while waiting for her supplier call to begin. She was standing near a window display, her phone pressed to her ear, when she registered his presence beside her, not touching her, not interrupting, simply standing with his hands in his coat pockets, looking at the window display with the same expression a man wears when he has exactly nowhere else to be. She finished her call. Looked at him. "Are you following me?" she asked. "I was here first," he said. She looked around the bookstore. Empty. Late evening light. Rain beginning against the window. "That's a lie," she said. "Yes," he agreed, and the honesty of it disarmed her completely. They stayed in the bookstore until it closed. He pulled books from shelves and asked her opinions on things: on business biographies, on behavioral economics, on a Korean novel he described without translating the title. She pulled books back and challenged his opinions on 2 of them, and he argued with her with the particular pleasure of a man who rarely found opposition worth engaging. When the rain came down harder, they walked anyway, side by side under the neon glow of the city streets, shoulders close without touching. He leaned down near her ear once while they were walking and said, very quietly, "You keep trying to decide how concerned to be about me." "I haven't decided yet," she said. "I know." And somehow that amused him more than her certainty would have. The next 3 days developed a rhythm Georgia had not anticipated and could not fully explain. Mornings, logistics and supplier work, phone calls, documentation, the relentless infrastructure of an international business she had built from a ring light and a spreadsheet. Evenings, Seung-jun. Not always arranged, not always expected, but consistent in the way weather is consistent, not scheduled but somehow reliable. He took her to a late-night pojangmaka near the river, where they ate street food and argued about luxury branding until almost 1 in the morning. He appeared at the door of the business hotel restaurant where she was having a working dinner and seated himself across from her without an invitation, which irritated her almost as much as how immediately her dinner companion, a Korean logistics consultant named Park Dae-won, straightened in his chair and became visibly uncomfortable. She noticed. She also noticed that Seung-jun did not acknowledge Park Dae-won's discomfort at all. He simply looked at Georgia and asked her a question about the supplier meeting she'd had that afternoon, as though there was no one else at the table, and something in his eyes during that exchange, something still and certain and very close to possessive, sent a warmth through her that she spent the rest of dinner refusing to examine. Park Dae-won left early. Seung-jun moved to his vacated chair without comment and ordered tea. "You made him uncomfortable on purpose," Georgia said. "He was looking at you the way people look at things they intend to take without asking." His voice was mild. His expression was not. "I don't enjoy that." She stared at him. You don't have any claim over. No, he agreed quietly. I don't. He held her gaze. Yet? The word landed somewhere below her composure and stayed there. For days after the container release, Georgia finalized her Korea logistics arrangements and booked her return flight to Los Angeles. She told herself it was time. Her business needed her. Her team needed her. And Seung-jun, whoever he truly was, however deep his access to the port systems ran, whatever the full shape of his power looked like in the daylight, was a man she understood just enough to know she did not understand him fully. And that was the most dangerous thing she had ever encountered. She texted him the evening before her flight. Short, professional. Heading back tomorrow. Thank you for your help with the container situation. He replied in 4 words, I'll see you out. She did not argue. She did not tell him the flight was early. Somehow she knew he already knew. She was standing in the hotel lobby at 5:40 a.m. when he walked through the entrance in dark slacks and a black coat, carrying 2 coffees, his expression carrying that particular calmness that had never once, across all of their evenings together, broken into anything she could fully read. He handed her the coffee. She took it without speaking. They stood in the lobby for a moment, city still dark outside the glass doors, and Georgia felt the weight of everything that had not been said collecting in the space between them like pressure before a storm. You never told me what you actually do, she said finally. No, he agreed. That bothers me. I know. He watched her face. It bothers you less than it should. She looked at her coffee, then at him. Is that a problem? He was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that she felt the answer before he gave it. For other people, he said carefully, possibly. For you, I'm not sure yet. She didn't know what to do with that, so she said goodbye the way people say goodbye when they mean something closer to don't let this be the last time. And he watched her walk through those glass doors the way a man watches something he has already decided not to let go of. Quick pause. If this story has you hooked, tap like and drop your thoughts below. Now, back to the story. Los Angeles pulled Georgia back into its noise with the particular cruelty of cities that do not pause for personal disruption. She returned to 1,200 unread emails, a viral resurgence of the cosmetic organizer after a second creator mentioned it unprompted in his skincare documentary, and a logistics crisis in Singapore that required her to be on calls before she had finished unpacking. She worked the way she always worked, efficiently, obsessively, with a focus that most people in her industry mistook for ambition when it was really closer to survival instinct. She had built this company in the hours stolen from sleep, and she did not take it for granted for a single day. But in the strange quiet hours between one call ending and another beginning, Seung-jun arrived in her thoughts with an ease she could not explain and did not fully trust. She told herself distance was clarifying. She told herself the chemistry in Seoul had been a product of circumstances, exhaustion, unfamiliar city, the adrenaline of a business crisis, and the particular heightening of perception that came with it. She told herself this the way people tell themselves things they already know are not entirely true. 3 days after her return, a package arrived at her office. No sender name. International shipping origin Seoul. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a first edition of a behavioral economics book she had argued with Seung-jun about in the bookstore, with a single handwritten note tucked inside the front cover. You were right about Chapter 7. S. She stood in her office holding that book for considerably longer than was reasonable. Then she sat down and sent him a message. You have terrible timing. His reply came within 2 minutes. I have excellent timing. You're thinking about me. She put her phone down, picked it up, put it down again. 2 weeks later, the threat arrived. It did not come through official channels. It arrived as a pattern Georgia noticed herself. 3 competitor brands that had launched near-identical versions of her cosmetic organizer within the same 72-hour window, using nearly identical product photography, nearly identical descriptions, and pricing strategies that suggested coordination rather than coincidence. On its own, that was aggressive but not unprecedented. What made her stomach tighten was the secondary pattern she found when she dug deeper. Two of her primary overseas manufacturers had quietly declined renewal contracts without explanation in the same week. Her Singapore logistics partner had received an anonymous complaint filing that mirrored a flagged customs review nearly identical to the one she had just survived in Korea. Someone was running a coordinated pressure campaign against her supply chain. She called her attorney. She called her operations manager. She called her most trusted business advisor, a woman named Claudette who had been helping her navigate the back end of international commerce since year 2. Claudette said what Georgia already suspected. This isn't random competition, baby. This is organized. Someone with logistics industry connections is trying to cut your legs out. Georgia thought about the Korean port, about a customs flag with no clear origin, about a man who knew exactly which government contact had created the problem before she had finished explaining it. She picked up her phone and called Seung-jun. He answered on the second ring, as though he had been expecting it. "Tell me what you know about who's been pressuring my supply chain," she said without greeting. A pause. Measured. "How much do you know already?" "Enough to know it's coordinated. Not enough to know who's behind it." Another pause. Longer this time. "Georgia." The way he said her name, careful, low, as though he was deciding something while he spoke it, made the air in her chest compress. "I need you to listen carefully. There are people in certain import markets who see what you've built as a threat to structures they've controlled for a long time. When your brand went global the way it did, you became visible to people who don't manage competition the way investors do." "Who specifically?" "I'll handle it." "That is not what I asked." "I know." His voice was steady, but she could feel something underneath it, something that was not quite calm, that was closer to the controlled energy of a man keeping something contained by sheer will. "Trust me to handle it." "Seung-jun." She kept her voice even. "I built this company without anyone handling things for me. I don't need. I know exactly what you built and exactly how you built it." A beat. "That's not what this is. This is me telling you that the people involved in this are not the kind you manage with attorneys and supply chain audits. Let me work on this end. You keep running your business." She was silent for a long moment. "I don't like this," she said finally. "I know." And somehow the quiet certainty in those two words, not dismissal, not impatience, but genuine acknowledgement, settled something in her chest she hadn't realized was wound tight. The following 2 weeks were a study in watching a problem dissolve without being able to see who was dissolving it. The competitor brands quietly pulled their listings. The manufacturer renewal issues resolved without Georgia making a single additional call. The Singapore complaint filing was mysteriously withdrawn. And, through all of it, Seung-jun called her every 2 or 3 days, not to report progress, not to explain himself, but simply to ask how she was sleeping, whether she had eaten, how the new product testing was going. She started answering the calls the moment they came in, even when she was in the middle of something. She noticed this about herself and filed it alongside everything else she was not fully examining. He told her, on a Thursday evening call that stretched past midnight her time, that he was coming to Los Angeles in 10 days for business. She didn't ask what business. She said, "Let me know when you land," and then spent the next 10 days trying to decide what that meant. He landed on a Tuesday morning and texted her the moment he was through customs. She was in a product testing session when the message arrived and she stepped outside into the hallway to read it, which told her something about her priorities she was still not fully ready to confront. They met for dinner that evening, a quiet, expensive restaurant in West Hollywood that he had chosen and reserved without consulting her, which should have irritated her and somehow didn't. He was seated when she arrived, dark jacket, that particular stillness about him that she had started to understand as not coldness, but containment, a man holding an enormous amount of something very carefully. He stood when she approached the table. His eyes moved over her, not in the way men usually looked at her, inventory quick and self-satisfied, but in the way people look at things that relieve them. As though seeing her in person resolved something that distance had left unfinished. "You look tired," he said. "Hello to you too," she said, sitting. He sat across from her and smiled, a real one this time, not the measured, almost smiles she had catalogued from Seoul, and it changed his face entirely, made him look younger and less armored. And Georgia felt the impact of it somewhere. She was running out of excuses to ignore. Dinner stretched 3 hours. They talked about everything, her business, his work in terms careful enough that she still couldn't fully map its borders, about her family in Atlanta, about the years she had spent working a full-time job while building her brand in the margins of her own life. He listened to that last part with an attention that made her feel visible in a way that was almost uncomfortable, like standing in direct sunlight after a long time in shade. Afterward, walking to her car through the cool Los Angeles night, he said quietly, "You keep waiting for me to become someone less worth trusting." She stopped walking. He stopped beside her. "That's not something I said," she told him. "No," he agreed. "But it's something you're doing." She looked up at him. The distance between them was small enough that she could see the line of his jaw clearly, the controlled stillness in his eyes, the way he was very deliberately not closing the remaining space between them because he was giving her the choice. "Seung-jun." Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "Georgia." Same quiet. Same weight. "I don't know enough about what you actually do to." "Yes, you do," he said softly. "You've known since the port." And the thing was, he was right. She had known. She had filed every piece of evidence carefully and chosen not to assemble them into the full picture because assembling them would require deciding something. The access. The phone calls that resolved impossible problems. The way powerful people in the Korean port had tracked his movement across a room without appearing to look at him. The way he moved through the world as though the world had agreed to accommodate him. "You're not just a logistics consultant," she said. "No." "How far does it go?" He considered the question with an honesty she had not expected. "Far enough that certain governments know my name and would prefer I remained invisible. Far enough that the people who were pressuring your supply chain stopped the moment they understood you were connected to me." A pause. "Far enough that you are safer standing near me than standing away from me, and I'm aware that's a complicated thing to say to a woman who built everything she has by standing on her own." She was quiet for a long time, processing the full weight of what he had just told her. "Then, why me? You could have released my shipment without ever introducing yourself." He looked at her for a moment with an expression she didn't have a category for yet. "Because I watched you dismantle a system in 40 minutes using only accurate questions, and I haven't been genuinely surprised by a person in years." He held her gaze steadily. "And because the moment you walked away from that customs office, I understood I was going to find reasons to be where you were until you let me." The danger arrived 6 days later. Georgia was in her office at 11 at night, not unusual, when she noticed the car that had been parked outside her building for 2 hours. She noticed it because she noticed patterns. She noticed it specifically because it hadn't moved, the engine was running, and the building's lobby security had already sent one of the guards to check twice without result. She called Seung-jun. He picked up and she described it without dramatizing it, the car, the position, the timing, a piece of information she had not mentioned on their recent calls, but was connecting now. A man had approached 2 of her employees in separate incidents over the past week asking questions about her shipping schedule. He was at her building in 22 minutes. She had never seen him move through a space the way he moved through her lobby, not rushing, not aggressive, but with a purposefulness that made every person in the vicinity instinctively create space. He found her in the lobby, put one hand at the small of her back, and guided her toward the elevator with a calm that told her he had already assessed the situation on his way in. "The car is connected to a man named Shin Byung-woo," he said in the elevator. "He's connected to one of the import networks whose revenue streams your brand has been affecting." "Affecting how?" "Your price point and manufacturing relationships undercut a distribution structure he has built over 15 years. A pause. "He's not intelligent enough to be genuinely dangerous. He is, however, petty enough to escalate without thinking about consequences." The elevator opened onto her floor. He checked it before she exited. "You're scaring me a little," she said. He looked at her. "Good. I need you to take this seriously." Then, quieter, "I need you safe." The last 3 words were not logistics. They were not strategy. They landed differently, personal and unguarded in a way that everything else about him rarely was, and Georgia felt them settle into her chest like something permanent taking root. She had people she could call. She had protocols. But standing in the hallway of her office building at 11:30 at night watching Seung-jun move through her world with the focused protectiveness of a man who had decided she mattered more than whatever this cost him, she understood that something had shifted irrevocably between them and that she had been pretending otherwise for weeks. Seung-jun. He turned from checking the office corridor. "I'm done pretending this isn't what it is," she said simply. He went very still. "I've been trying to keep it professional and I've been trying to keep it logical and I've been telling myself I don't know enough about you." She held his gaze. "But I know the parts that matter. And I know how I feel every time you call. And I'm tired of hiding it." He crossed the hallway in 3 steps, stood close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to hold his eyes, and his hands came to her face, careful, steady, and he looked at her with the full undivided attention of a man who had been waiting for a very specific door to open. "Georgia." Low voice. Very certain. "Given already." She laughed, surprised, real, and the sound of it seemed to do something to him, because he exhaled slowly and pressed his forehead against hers. And for a moment they stayed like that in the quiet hallway while the city hummed below and the danger outside was real and the feelings between them were more real still. The situation with Shin Byung-woo resolved within 48 hours in ways Georgia did not ask to have detailed, because she had come to understand that some doors in Seung-jun's world she was better off appreciating from the outside. What she knew was this: the pressure on her supply chain ceased entirely. The surveillance stopped. 2 of the manufacturers who had declined her renewal contracts reached back out within the week. And Seung-jun, when she asked him directly what had happened, said only that certain parties had been reminded that the cost of continuing outweighed the benefit. She accepted that answer. She also accepted what it told her about the man she had chosen. 6 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon in Georgia's apartment, which Seung-jun had appeared in with breakfast food and a total absence of apology for his presumption, she was sitting beside him on the couch reviewing product launch documents when he looked up from the book he had been reading and said, without preface, "I want you to know something." She looked at him. "I have operated in spaces most people never see and never should. I have made decisions in those spaces I don't apologize for because they were necessary." He looked at her steadily. "But I have never wanted anything the way I want a life that includes you in it. And I need you to know that clearly, because I don't want you to one day wonder whether I meant it." Georgia set her documents down. Outside, the Los Angeles afternoon was bright and ordinary, full of the sounds of a city going about itself. Inside, something enormous and quiet settled into place between them, not the compressed urgency of the harbor district or the electric tension of Seoul's neon-soaked streets, but something steadier and warmer and built to last. "I know you meant it," she said. "Good." He picked his book back up. Then, almost immediately, put it down again. "You're very difficult to read when you're calm, you know that? You told me I was transparent. In the harbor. When you were hiding something." He turned to look at her fully. "Right now you're not hiding anything. That's different. That's new." She smiled. "Get used to it." He looked at her for a long moment with the expression she had finally developed a category for, the one that meant she had surprised him again, and that he had long since accepted he would spend the foreseeable future being surprised by her, and that he intended to be present for every moment of it. "I intend to," he said simply. And in the warm, ordinary Sunday light of her apartment, surrounded by product documents and a book he kept failing to read and the life she had built entirely on her own now beginning to make room for something she had not planned for, Georgia Brooks decided that the most dangerous thing Seung-jun had ever done to her was make her feel completely, terrifyingly safe. You made it to the end, and that means you're truly part of the Sonnet Love Stories family. Thank you for your support. Like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be replying as always, and stay subscribed because the next story is already waiting for you.